Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. The past few weeks, we've seen an overwhelming amount of information coming from Capitol Hill, plus more lawsuits than anyone can count. So we want to talk about some of the things Connecticut is keeping a close eye on. First, infrastructure funding. We've told you before, Connecticut received some of the highest amounts in the country when it comes to roads, rails, and more. While the state was prepared to see less money, a U.S. Department of Transportation memo has brought up new concerns about a potential target on the state. The federal guidance claims immigration enforcement, along with marriage and birth rates, could determine just how much funding a state gets. Governor Lamont poked fun and expressed worry during his budget address last week.
Preference would be given to communities where marriage and birth rates are higher than the national average. Okay. We're a little lower than the national average, so my children, hurry up, get married, go forth and procreate, and you may get a bridge in your hometown.
Another funding issue, Head Start. We can tell you as of taping this, Head Start spending, which impacts Connecticut's youngest students, is still stopped, while it'll take a judge's decision to truly know what the future holds for programs like this one. The Trump administration is still attempting to dismantle the Department of Education, now asking Congress to help. Kate Diaz, president of Connecticut's Education Association, says they are preparing but are still unsure what to make of all this back and forth.
There is not a family in Connecticut or across the country that isn't impacted in some way, shape, or form by the Department of Education. Let's say they go, we're getting out of the business of education, but we're still going to send Connecticut $1 billion, right? So if all of a sudden our State Department had the responsibility of working through $1 billion of distributions, that would be an enormous task for us to take on. Now, that is our best case scenario, right? Like we go down the road and we don't have any loss of that financial.
Connecticut's own Linda McMahon is playing a big part in this. She's Trump's pick for the very department he's trying to get rid of, currently undergoing her Senate confirmation hearings. This week, the department began laying off employees as well. Governor Lamont also spoke about how federal rhetoric and President Trump's mass deportation efforts are affecting local schools, saying there are students who are staying home out of fear. Within his budget address, Lamont delivered a message of safety here in Connecticut, saying non-criminal immigrants will be protected. That's a stronger stance than he'd previously taken in recent months leading up to inauguration. It comes down to Connecticut's law, which some believe is at odds with federal guidance. The truth is, the policy here is completely legal. It's called the Trust Act. It essentially limits how much information police can hand over to ICE, except if there's an active criminal arrest warrant at play for a high felony charge or in other certain criminal cases. ICE, according to our state law, needs a signed judicial warrant to arrest anyone, or it could be an administrative removal warrant for things like terrorism charges. Some state Republicans have suggested changing our state's policy, but even without a Trust Act rewrite yet, the state guidance is already getting more complicated. Federal prosecutors are now being told to go after law enforcement who they believe aren't supporting President Trump's more expansive deportations. Connecticut could be under fire for retaliation. Listen to some of our leaders' reactions to that.
That's just shameful and something that you'd see in Iran or Russia or North Korea, but how sad that we're seeing that in the United States today. The fact that the Trump administration is trying to force us to do their job is not appropriate, but it also means that it will take away work from the police department that is really important to keeping our community safe. The overwhelming majority of immigrants in our community are safe, law-abiding, tax-paying residents.
We get the bad guys off the street, and we work with any federal authorities to keep us safe. We don't waste time on the immigration status of speeders and shoplifters.
Trump's administration, in just a matter of weeks, has also targeted gender policy. One of his very first acts was attempting to rule the federal government only recognizes two genders. Now, we are starting to see more concrete policy come out, from passport renewals to gender-affirming care coverage. Things are getting more complicated for a large population here in Connecticut. President Trump also signed an executive order last week trying to ban transgender athletes from school sports, threatening to withhold all funding from educational programs which don't comply with that order. Transgender women in sports is an issue that stemmed from a track lawsuit right here in Connecticut years ago. The truth is, once again, most of the executive orders you're seeing come from President Trump's Oval Office are already being legally challenged and in some cases blocked, but advocates say the damage is larger than the policy proposals themselves.
The real impact of this order is the kind of fear and chilling effect it's going to have. It is going to create confusion, chaos, fear for transgender people.
It's important for you to understand that you are not alone. There is support, especially in a state like Connecticut.
Now, our state still allows different gender markers on official documents, protects doctors and nonprofits in gender-affirming care, and more. While we'll continue to cover for you how federal orders affect Connecticut policy, the laws that still hold true here are actually driving up our population. Advocates tell us even more people are now moving here, seeing the state as a safe haven. As political news and attempted policy changes continue at this rate, we want to remind you to pace yourself, but of course, stay informed and stay engaged. The number on your screen here connects you to your congressional representation, so you can tell them what matters to you. And you can always find all of our coverage of all things local and how the national impacts us here on air, online, and on the free Fox 61 News app. That does it for us now this morning on The Real Story. Have a great Sunday.